It's my prayer that the world's religious leader will have the courage to address the demon within our communities and the wisdom to choose a path to a far more stable, prosperous, and peaceful world built upon respect for God, giving dignity for every human being. As Pope Francis in his encyclical Fratelli Tutti reminds us, every human being has the right to live with dignity, a dignity based not on circumstances, but on intrinsic worth of their being. Unless this principle is upheld, there will be no future either for fraternity or for the survival of humanity. Thanks to the visionary efforts of Nahdlatul Ulama, which formed the R20, and the Muslim World League, which is the co-hosting the summit, all of us assembled here have the privilege of assuming a place at the table of a global discussion and decision where elements, faith and spiritual dignity have often been ignored or neglected. We know that our sense of dignity as religious believers is inseparable from our faith after 3 centuries of repeated political and social movements to remove the foundation of faith from our lives. We are all participants today in a unique historical moment, an opportunity to revise the course. We must be sure we are up to task and not let this opportunity pass by us. We are most fortunate to have this chance to proclaim our faith openly with the context of G20, whose discussions and decisions directly or indirectly impact all humanity. However, if we are to proceed beyond this surface talk and shallow arguments typical of most interfaith gatherings, and truly to be worthy to contribute to global discussion and decision-making at the highest level, we must first confront the violent sectarianism among us and the persecution of the other, which is its evil partner. The people of God, the chosen people, khayru ummatin, is a call to responsibility to care for the creation of Almighty God and to keep it good. And we have to admit, all of us, that we failed this call. I speak as Iraqi Christians, but the challenges which face the Christians are the same as those faced by all religious minorities in Iraq, be the Yazidis, Kaka'i, or Muslims themselves. And this challenge is clear. How do we overcome the endless cycle of sectarian violence and persecution that repeat themselves within a regular horror to all of us? The harsh truth is this question is without an end to this sectarian violence and persecution, there is no future for religious pluralism in Iraq or elsewhere in Middle East for this matter. Just to speak, on statistics, Christians from Middle East, the number of the Christian in Middle East dropped from 20% to less than 3% in the last 50 years. The brutal logic of this is that there does eventually reach an endpoint where there are no minorities left to kill and no minorities left to persecute. As I share with you this experience, I pray that you will find in our story a clear warning to you all. Following more than 1,900 years of existence in Mesopotamia, we Christians of Iraq now find ourselves on the very edge of extinction, the same end faced by the Iraqi Jews before us, and the same end now being faced by the Yazidis, within whom we have suffered so much pain alongside us. The most recent immediate cause in this existential struggle is the ISIS terror that led to displacement of more than 125,000 Christians from our historical homeland and left us in a single night without shelter and refuge, without work or properties, without churches and monasteries, without the ability to participate in any of the things which gives one a life of dignity: family visits, celebrations of weddings and births, the sharing of sorrows. Our terminators stole our present while they blow up our past, and did all within their power to destroy our future. And yet we are still there. And so now we will speak to you the truth. Please understand that this truth comes ultimately from a place of love and forgiveness for all. And the truth is that there is a continuing crisis of violence and persecution in the Islamic world, which in the year 2022 cannot be longer ignored. This crisis of violence and persecution continue to affect the entire Middle East, Africa, Asia, and beyond, and it's affecting everyone. Muslims are the first one to be affected by this crisis. And if this crisis is not acknowledged and fixed, and then ultimately there can be no future for Christians and other minorities or any form of religious pluralism in the Middle East. Indeed, there is little reason to see a future for anyone in the Middle East, including within the Islamic world itself, other than in the context of continuing violence, revenge, and hatred. And as we have seen too many times, the violence, once unleashed, overtakes us all. I fully understand the political and social difficulty of this subject. My experience most often has been that to raise this matter in Western or global audience is to invite a charge of Islamophobia, mainly from social critics speaking theoretically from places far removed from any threat or actual experience. But for we Iraqi Christians, this is not an abstract matter. Prior to ISIS horror of 2014, we Iraqi Christians had historically attempted to maintain a dialogue of coexistence with Muslims, unequal though it may have been. In this dialogue, we refrained from speaking honestly and truthfully to our Muslim rulers in order to simply survive and live quietly. We do not openly face the long history of recurring violence and persecution against us, but following the horror of ISIS, there is nothing left for us but to speak plainly and truthfully. For the sake of humanity, including the followers of Islam themselves, it must be addressed openly and honestly. What then is the truth of the Iraqi Christians' experience over the past decades? How should we look at the terror that and still is ISIS? When asking whether ISIS was truly an Islamic state or a distortion of Islamic theology, consider the following words quoted during the ISIS war in Time magazine. Western politicians should stop pretending that extremism and terrorism have nothing to do with Islam. There is a clear relationship between fundamentalism, terrorism, and the basic assumption of Islamic orthodoxy. So, as long as we lack conscience regarding this matter, we cannot gain victory over fundamentalist violence within Islam. These words come not from any political figure in the world, in the West, but from a leader of the largest Muslim organization in the world, Indonesian Islamic leader Yahya Stakuf. As you are aware, His Excellency was the driving force behind this summit, and I am grateful to him not only for that effort, but for the following a place for this most important discussion to take place in the open light of the day. In any case, we cannot run from it, any of us here. We live in this tipping point of history, one of which an aggressive secularism seeks to drive all elements of faith into oblation, and with it all the basic principle of sacred nature of life, of family, of our obligation to our Creator. And while I am personally convinced that the world of faith will ultimately prevail, it cannot do so when the constant face of our world of faith is one of violence and persecution against the other, or even against ourselves. At the heart of this discussion lies questions of interpretation of the sacred text, to which we all in our various faiths struggle to adhere. Will our faith communities continue to accept and act upon superficial and violent interpretations of our faiths, which allows us to torment others, while we remain certain of our own moral righteousness? Or will we, as people of faith, evolve to something greater and deeper, a place where a culture of faith is always and everywhere understood to be a universal blessing, because it is a culture of life remembering, Ya ayyuhan nas, إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. My dear brothers and sisters, we people of faith cannot lead the world in this direction if we only dare to try, if only in each of our faith, as Christ asks us, we hypocrites can each remove the log from our eyes. I have to finish. Yes. We Christians are people of hope, but facing the end also bring us a clarity, and with it the courage to finally speak the truth. Our hope to remain in our ancient homeland now rests on the ability of ourselves, our Muslim brothers and sisters, and the world to acknowledge these truths. Religiously motivated violence and persecution must end. Those who teach it must stop. Please pray for us as we pray for you. We are involved here through the R20 in a historical call to show the world the beauty of faith. Let us now commit one and all to an authentic dialogue of life. Thank you and God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Archbishop Bashar Matti Warda. Please remain to your stage, and we would like to invite Mr. Eko Ernada to give the token of appreciation. And moving on to the third plenary session, I would like to welcome our moderator, Mr. Stephen M. Rasche, Vice Chancellor, Catholic University of Erbil.
So, good evening. I want to thank all of you here for your fortitude and solidarity. I truly appreciate it. We're embarked on a difficult and long road in this effort. And without fortitude and solidarity, we won't get there. So I thank all of you for having the fortitude and solidarity to sit here and wait for these last speakers who have all flown from halfway around the world to be here. So thank you. I'd like to thank as well Archbishop Bashar Warda for his speech. Again, my name is Stephen Rasche. I'm the Vice Chancellor of the Catholic University in Erbil, where I have the great honor and pleasure to work for His Grace, Archbishop Bashar. And when I'm not in Iraq, I have the equal honor to be a visiting scholar at the Kuka Center in Nigeria, where I work with His Grace, Bishop Matthew Hassan Kuka, who is here, I believe, somewhere, and you'll hear from him tomorrow. We have a great last 5 speakers for you here today, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to call them all up. If you could all come up here as I call your name, and then take the seats, and we'll move along with this. First, Professor Tariq Mansoor. Swapan Dasgupta. Good afternoon. Then Reverend Krieger, Christian Krieger. at this historic seat of learning. Established in 1920, a surgeon by profession, he has 4 decades of teaching, research, and administrative experience and 99 publications to his credit, including the supervision of some 58 postgraduate students. He represented India at the first India-Indonesia Interfaith Dialogue in Yogyakarta as part of the delegation of the Ministry of External Affairs for the Government of India. He also represented India at a symposium on higher education in South Asia held in Istanbul and organized by the Halling Center for International Dialogue in Washington, D.C., USA. Professor Mansoor, please come to the podium.
Assalamu alaikum, namaste, good afternoon, shalom to all the distinguished dignitaries and delegates of R20 Summit. Now coming to this historical grievances, the present day generation cannot be held liable for any injustice perpetrated by the forefathers and ancestors in any country, region or community. All persons have to be judged in the time they lived. A few centuries back in medieval times, concepts such as democracy, secularism, liberalism did not exist. Most human beings have commitment in their inner soul for the happiness and welfare of all on this planet. Now in medieval times, there were certain issues and conflicts which occurred in the Indian subcontinent. But even in those times, there were rulers and persons who believed in harmony, peaceful coexistence and brotherhood. And I have been asked by the organizers to highlight these persons and these rulers. Since time immemorial, India has been a land which has attracted many invaders and conquerors. It has also been a land of many opportunities, where many trading and mercantile communities had migrated and prospered. Even at the time when the Harappan civilization was at its zenith, it was attracting many communities and people who lived beyond the river Sindh and the high mountains. Known as Miluha to the world outside, the Indian civilization this side of the river attracted traders from many communities. If one reads the Rig Veda and compare it with what is there in Zend Avesta, we discover many intellectual and cultural exchanges which took place between those who lived in what we call India today and the region of Fars, the modern Iran. Those who invaded India since ancient times till recent history included many nationalities, ethnicities, religious groups and communities. The Greeks, the Mongols, Iranians, Turks, Arabs, Huns, Portuguese, French, Dutch, English and so on. But each conquering race, ethnic group or religion was to contribute to the development of the all-encompassing Indian culture. One invasion which most Indians remember for its brutality was the invasion of Ghaznavid ruler Sultan Mahmud. During his multiple invasions, he invaded India 17 times. Many cities were devastated and many places of worship, including ancient temples, were harmed. Some rulers also imposed discriminatory policies such as additional taxes on non-Muslims. This was known as jizya. Despite all this, there were a number of kings who stood for harmony and tolerance, and there were periods marked by peaceful coexistence. It was not conflict all the time. Interactions also led to new sciences, new way of buildings, constructions, art of making paper, distillation of wine, evolution of new languages, and many other things. Let me highlight the role of a few Muslim rulers who stood for unity and peace. A proper understanding of all cultures and religious traditions was a step taken by the Mughal Emperor Akbar, who in 1580 came up with the idea of absolute peace, or peace for all. This he calls Sul-e-Kul. There are 4 salient features of this. One was, all religions have freedom of expression. There will be no discrimination on the basis of religion. And different religions, they will not fight with each other. And importantly, last, the religions, they will not undermine the status of the king or of the state. From 1575, he started the concept of a religious discussion to which experts of all faiths were invited. Jains, Brahmins, Hindu Pandits, Muslims, both Shia and Sunni, Christians, Zoroastrians and others. His interactions with religious classes of all religions were such that Islamic clergy doubted his religious credentials. A Jewish priest remarked that by tolerating all, you are negating all. Akbar also started not only interreligious marriages, but also the project translating the text of one culture into the other. Thus Sanskrit Ramayana and Mahabharata, Sanskrit texts of science and arithmetic, and even texts like Panchtantra were translated to Persian. Interactions between the Mughals and the locals were such that a large number of grants were given for the construction and maintenance of temples of Vrindavan in Mathura. The Mughal nobility from this period onwards comprised of people of various religious, ethnic, and racial groups. It was a cosmopolitan nobility, a feature so unique that we don't encounter it elsewhere. Such interactions and give and take continued under other Mughal emperors, Jahangir and Shah Jahan. If Akbar would discuss Vedanta with Yogi Devi, Jahangir used to visit other Hindu priests in their caves to discuss Vedantic philosophy. Shah Jahan in one of his temple grants mentions that lighting a diya is an earthen lamp, in a temple was equal to praying to the Almighty. The Hindu Rajput queens in the palaces of Akbar, Jahangir and Shah Jahan were allowed to follow their religious traditions and practices. During the reign of Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan, we have Prince Dara Shikoh, his eldest son, who not only had Upanishads, they are the Hindu religious scriptures. He not only got the Upanishads translated into Persian and wrote a book, Majmu'ul Bahrain, whose Sanskrit version was called Samudra Sangam. Majmu'ul Bahrain means confluence of 2 oceans or confluence of 2 seas. So the confluence of Hinduism and Islam. So Darashik was always searching for commonalities in the great religions, especially between Hinduism and Islam. Dara Shikoh believed what he wrote, that there was much in common between Hinduism and Islam, and Upanishads were also heavenly books which have been referred in other religious texts. Translating the Upanishads into Persian led to their subsequent translation into Latin and exposed Europeans for the first time to Hindu religious texts. Because at that time the Europeans, they knew Persian, but they did not know Sanskrit. So once the Upanishads or the Hindu scriptures were translated into Persian, they were translated into Latin and French, and for the first time the Europeans, they were exposed to the Hindu scriptures also. This give and take and development of common shared culture continued even during the 18th and 19th centuries. Unfortunately, all broke asunder under the rule and policies of colonial rulers and led to many unfortunate events in the recent history of the subcontinent, including partition of the country. It should be remembered that a vast majority of Muslims in India are converts from Hinduism. 90% of the Muslims in India, they are converted from Hinduism. The Indian society by and large believes in inclusiveness and has assimilated many ethnicities, religious groups and communities since time immemorial. Indian Bharatiya tradition is unique, as we may not agree with the different views of others, but we respect and try to accommodate them. Diversity is the permanent phenomena of the nature, so we should all respect it and should not try for uniformity in the field of language, food habits, dress, religion, culture, festivals, and so on. In spite of differences in India, we always try to search the threads of cooperation and coordination. This is the basic feature of the Indian society. Thank you so much.
Swapan Dasgupta. He is a former member of the Parliament of the Upper House of India's Parliament. He is one of India's most widely read political columnists for the past 3 decades, having worked in almost all the leading publications in India in senior editorial positions. He's been an independent columnist since 2003, and in 2015 he was awarded the Padma Bhushan Prize by the President of India. Please welcome Sri Swapan Dasgupta.
Namaskar, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. In the brief time I have before me, let me just elaborate some of the basic points which are there in this thing about historical grievances. Now, this morning I came across an article in the Times of London which argued that they should stop teaching British history in Britain. The reason why this article argued was that there is a fairy tale version of history which is often presented to people, whereby all the rough edges on the subject are very conveniently glossed over. I think this is an experience which a lot of other countries would share. I think we have in India a very peculiar situation where we have an official narrative which says that there were odd bits of trouble, but overall it was a period of excellent harmony. I think I wouldn't contest that, but what is to be noted, and I think this is really what is the important feature, is that there is a fault line in society which often manifests itself in politics, which often manifests itself in other facets of life, which come to the surface. And there is a difference and there is a wide divergence between what might be called the official narrative and popular perception. And it's that big gap which often needs to be addressed. And this big gap has to be addressed because it is the popular perception which often manifests itself and creates problems. I think in the earlier discourse on conflict resolution which was there, prior to 9/11, the entire issue of religion, or more important, theology, was glossed over. It was buried. It's only now that in a very tentative and unsure sort of way, it's coming up in some form of discussion, but it's not adequate. Let's take one of the major fissures which took place in India over the past 30 years, which was a dispute which was called the Ayodhya dispute. which was about rebuilding a Hindu temple which had been demolished sometime in the 16th century, 16th century by a Mughal invader. Now, there are a lot of pros and cons which could be said, but the important thing here was the question in popular perception of how certain sacred spaces of Hindus had, because of a combination of politics and because of a combination of certain religious beliefs, been appropriated. Ayodhya was one aspect of that. There were other sacred spaces which had also become subjects of dispute. But if you looked at the official narrative of history, you'd find that this had been glossed over in some way. It had been obfuscated, rather than outright denial, it had been obfuscated. A frontal view of what exactly took place has always been hidden for political expediency. Far from adding to harmony, it is my belief, and I think this would be confirmed, that this sort of obfuscation, denial, has only worsened situation and created a mismatch between what can be called the official narrative and popular perception. And when popular perceptions take over in a democracy, that is what really rules the roost in electoral politics. So this is one basic area which has to be addressed. The entire question of history, of how frontally do we address the rough edges of history, especially when religious conflict and the loss of political sovereignty converge at some point. And here, this is the important thing in which we find in India, where the conflict of a certain religion and the loss of political sovereignty actually met at some point. And I think this is a problem which will need to be addressed very, very seriously. The other issue, which really is, and I think, because if we are to get healthy, wholesome politics, which believes in harmony, which believes in nation building, taking all the people along, there has to be some form, at least in the history books, in the official narrative, of some sort of a truth and reconciliation issue. But that's not all. I think there is another aspect which needs to be dealt with. The earlier speaker, the Honorable Vice Chancellor from Aligarh University, Muslim University, spoke quite rightly about the fact that the important thing in India is that 90% of the Indian Muslims are basically converts. And this is true also perhaps mostly of the Christian community as well. There is a practice in Australia which I find very appealing, whereby when any public function is there, they first acknowledge their debt to the indigenous communities whose lands had been appropriated at one point. I don't here mean this way. I don't necessarily mean that that should be carried on. But what is important is that a certain measure of historical continuity has got to be absorbed into the official psyche. This entire break, a complete mental break from the past, a dismissal of what existed in the past. In other words, a change of faith does not necessarily mean a change of nationality. That idea is very important to be put across. Until that is done, we are likely to get a situation where popular feelings of they belong somewhere else, we belong here, that perception will keep on coming. And it is in this realm that religious leaders of both communities, popular religious practices have a very, very large share and a very, very major contribution to make. But that can only be done if it is complemented by the works of scholars, historians, who must get out of this policy of denial and squeamishness and address these things frontally. So what I'm talking about here is that in meetings such as this, when G20 can actually address the question of religion frontally, talk about theology, sometimes bluntly, sometimes awkward issues have to be raised, but with the larger idea that we form, the purpose being that of wholesome citizenship, which is the ultimate objective, the peace and a common development for all, that should be the main objective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dasgupta. Our next speaker is Reverend Christian Krieger, the President of the Conference of European Churches from France. Reverend Krieger was elected President of the Conference of European Churches at its 2018 General Assembly. A pastor and theologian from Strasbourg, he has extensive experience with ecumenical, social, and ecclesial engagements. Reverend Krieger also serves as president of the Protestant Federation of France. He grew up in Alsace in a Lutheran family, deeply engaged with the church. He was educated in Protestant theology with an emphasis on history at the University of Strasbourg in France. Let us please welcome Reverend Christian Krieger.
Assalamu alaikum, dear sisters and brothers. I was asked to speak on an historical topic and to draw lessons for the present. On the 24th of August, 1572, St. Bartholomew's Day and the following days, a total of more than 3,000 Protestants were brutally mutilated and murdered in Paris. This massacre began a disastrous wave of murders that set the Kingdom of France on fire and resulted in more than 10,000 victims in just a few weeks. Perpetrated by the Catholics and condemned by the monarchy, this terrible massacre of Protestants left a lasting mark on people's conscience in France and more widely in Europe. On the 16th September 22, a few weeks ago, precisely 450 years after the massacre, religious authorities of Protestantism and Catholicism in France, heirs of both the victims and the perpetrator of that time, together inaugurated a memorial garden of the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in the heirs of the Louvre district in Paris. How could the heirs of this bloody symbol of religious fanaticism, some of whom bears the memorial wound of victimhood and others who feel the weight of an embarrassing heritage, unite their voice to finally write the memory of the victims in the urban landscape of Paris, 450 years after the events. This is the purpose of my contribution. I will do it in 4 points. Oh, it is quick. I have 5 minutes. Okay. So the first is to explain a little bit what happens historically, when Martin Luther tried to reform Christianity, it results into a major schism in Christianity in Western Europe or in Western society. And in France, the ideas of Martin Luther were first neutrally welcomed by the king, and in 1534, the king changed his attitude. In order to restore the unity of his kingdom, he tried to restore the unity of the Catholic Church by banning the so-called Reformed religion. As the Protestants resisted, claiming the freedom of conscience, This led them to be persecuted and gave rise to the War of Religions. During more than 4 decades, periods of armed conflict and alternative times of peace were happened in France. And in 1572, in order to settle a peace between the regions, the Catholic Marguerite de Valois, sister of the king, married the Protestant Henry de Navarre, future King Henry IV. And on that event, all the war leaders of the Protestants went to Paris, and they were killed on an attempt to their major Gaspard de Coligny attempt at assassination. And this assassination brought the crowd to galvanize their hatred, the hatred which was built up over years of persecution. A terrible barbarism results from a long period of religious fanaticism that only needs a spark to unleash the hatred of those committing the massacres toward those who had previously always been their neighbors. And the province soon followed and suite imitated the appalling carnage. Without being premeditated, the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre was the result of decades of hatred and persecution. There is a troubling continuity between the time before and the time of the crime. The so-called Bartholomew's Day massacre has entered in the collective consciousness as a bloody symbol of religious fanatism and the tyranny of the great. The philosopher, this is my second point, commemorating to become aware of a double impasse. The philosopher Paul Ricoeur has reflected on the right relationship to memory. The idea of a policy of a fair memory is in this respect one of the most interesting themes, because we are living in times of excessive commemorative frenzy, and in another way in a time of abandoning the past and allowing oblivion to shallow up that which could weight us down. It is more than appropriate to carry out this necessary work to build up a fair relationship to memory. And the philosopher Olivier Abel adds to that, the function of memory is not to preserve, but to push back the past, so that we are not submerged by the traces of the past. A correct memory therefore requires that the emotion generated by a traumatic event be overcome, so that the memory of the tragic can serve the present. And that's what I want to underline. Neither justice, nor peace, nor fraternity, nor freedom are built on the ground of amnesia, but are constructed on the foundation of reconciled memories. Thus today, the memory of the horror of St. Bartholomew's Day is about all the place where we become aware of a double impasse. The impasse represented by all forms of intolerance, all non-respect of otherness, all denial of the freedom of others. Intolerance and fanaticism, especially religious fanaticism, undermine the plural, multicultural and multi-religious society of our global world. Therefore, respecting minorities is a fundamental moral and political requirement, especially for a majority. And commemorating also makes us aware of another impasse represented by the collusion or even the confusion of politics and religion, of which history and present provides us numerous illustrations. Today, the relationship between Catholics and Protestants in France is nothing like the one that led to the massacre. Protestants are no longer victims and cannot wallow in their role of victimhood. Above all, it is unthinkable to assign the Catholicism a fossil image which ignore present realities, and despite the fruit of ecumenical movement and the achievement of the theological dialogues and meetings, which over the last few decades have forged a spirit of unity between Catholics and Protestants, a unity that is certainly differentiated, but a reconciled unity. Gradually, through fraternal meetings to know each other, through common readings of the Bible, through common praying and celebrating, but also through dialogue, theological dialogue, to better understand each other and to progress on the path of mutual recognition of both as the Church of Jesus Christ, and also through ecumenical cooperation. That's very important, to strengthen together a Christian witness in the world, because where doctrine divides, common action unites. Thus, gradually, not only has achieved the spirit of fraternal unity, but also a recognition of the other church as an authentic expression of the one and true Church of Jesus Christ. I come to my last point, healing memories. That's very important. Overcoming conflict is not enough. We must also heal the wounds of the memory. This notion of memorial wounds was inspired by the philosopher Oliver Abel. He wants to express that humiliation, that an identity wound can be produced over time, and how it can be transformed into persistent resentment, even violence and hatred. By virtue, I quote him, a memorial wound, peoples who remain humiliated from generation to generation, with this terrible time lag that the descendants of the guilty are no longer, or feel no longer guilty, where the descendants of the victims are still often victims or feel so. Humiliation is much more serious in the longer run than a pure and simple violence. And this is what poisons violence when the enemy is held in contempt. End of quote. We cannot change history, but we can change its influence on us. The time for healing memories is precisely the time in which comes in a conflict when the use of weapons has been suspended and the cycle of violence interrupted in favor of dialogue, which aims to find a peaceful solution to a dispute. Then comes the time of reconciliation, which aims to establish a lasting peace, the times when swords are turned into plowshares. For time alone is not enough to heal memories. Reconciliation is needed to heal the wounds of memories, those humiliations that can become the seeds of tomorrow's conflict. Reconciliation is a time to convert the hatreds of other into respect for otherness, and to transform resentment into fraternity, and by so doing, breathes life into the ethic of peace. And one of the key moments in this process of healing memories is that of writing together the common history of the facts, a work of truth that justice requires, in order to allow access to a process of reconciliation, even forgiveness. Let me conclude in saying that religious fanatism, hatred, non-recognition of the other and their otherness are the cancer for a globalized world. Only dialogue offers a credible alternative to violence and war, dialogue to resolve differences, and dialogue to heal wounded memories. Thank you for your attention.
We'll next hear from Professor Alexandre Fonseca. For those of you out there, Professor Fonseca will be speaking in Portuguese, but there is a translation available on your headsets. Professor Fonseca is a sociologist and professor at the NUTES Institute for Science and Health Education and vice rector at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. He is a member of the General Coordination of the Collective of Black Professors at UFRJ, and from 2012 to 2016, he was a special advisor to the President of Brazil on religious affairs. He is a Presbyterian layman and president of the Evangelical Organization for the Defense and Promotion of Human Rights. Please let us welcome Professor Fonseca.
Good afternoon, it's an honor to participate in this forum. Thank you for the presence and my participation for all. I speak in Portuguese, and time to use these fonts. Thanks to the translators. Religião e o inédito viável na América Latina, caminhos para a superação do racismo e das desigualdades. O mundo viu, no final do século XX, uma profusão religiosa não esperada. Disputas religiosas de dimensões globais ganharam evidência e ressaltaram a presença de uma religião pública. Há consenso hoje de que a era secular não representa mais a negação da presença da religião, mas sim a busca por compreender as condições e os termos de sua permanência e o seu papel. No Brasil, somente nos últimos anos é que o maior país católico do mundo experimenta efetivamente o pluralismo religioso. A desigualdade brasileira se apresenta de forma gritante em relação à cor da pele. Um pouco mais da metade da população é negra e sofre diariamente o violento racismo que persiste. Não há dado que resista a esta realidade. Entre os 10% mais ricos, 15% são negros. Entre os 10% mais pobres, 70% são negros. No Brasil, estima-se que 55% da população seja católica e 30% evangélica, sendo que desses a maioria é pentecostal. Os pentecostais hoje no Brasil representam pelo menos 17% da população, o que são 35 milhões de pessoas, o que coloca o Brasil como o país com o maior contingente de pentecostais no mundo. Esses fiéis têm atuado em algumas situações como agentes de emancipação social e de promoção dos direitos humanos, demarcando uma potencial capacidade de contribuir efetivamente na transformação social, considerando particularmente a sua maior presença entre mulheres, os mais pobres e pessoas negras, geralmente localizados nas favelas e periferias urbanas. Para identificar as contribuições da Igreja Evangélica para a transformação social no Brasil, é preciso olhar para além dos pastores que estão na mídia e das lideranças das igrejas. O que vimos intensamente nas recentes eleições presidenciais foi uma lamentável fusão entre religião e política, por parte de várias das lideranças religiosas. Isso em meio a uma grande difusão de mentiras, fake news, nas igrejas e por um significativo uso político da religião por líderes políticos, colocando em xeque os valores democráticos fundamentais. É preciso olhar em outra direção. É preciso olhar para as lideranças intermediárias, para aqueles que agem no território e para iniciativas de pequenas redes de solidariedade e de apoio social. A América Latina é berço da teologia da libertação, proposta oriunda do catolicismo e que visava oferecer e desenvolver uma fé cristã engajada. Entre evangélicos existe a teologia da missão integral, a qual salienta a importância da contextualização. Em um continente como a América Latina, essas teologias têm sido a base para que grupos cristãos busquem emancipação social e o enfrentamento das desigualdades e do racismo. O diálogo dessas teologias cristãs com a obra do educador brasileiro Paulo Freire tem sido importante. Saliento aqui um conceito, o conceito de conscientização, resultado de um processo em que as pessoas olham com mais nitidez ao seu redor. A conscientização é um ato de conhecimento, uma aproximação crítica da realidade. A conscientização é um processo disciplinado e intencional de educação, denominado de ação cultural. Um processo contínuo que implica em uma praxis, sendo uma relação dialética entre ação e reflexão. O psicólogo argentino Daniel Schipani fala que existiria uma teologia implícita na obra de Freire e no processo de conscientização. Ele afirma: Freire afirma que sem fé o diálogo libertador não pode ocorrer. Sem amor não há lugar para uma transformação e uma revolução autênticas. E sem esperança é impossível lutar por um mundo melhor. Freire defendia que esta conscientização, esse tomar posse da realidade, do mundo, dos outros e de si mesmo, por intermédio do diálogo e da educação, seria capaz de favorecer possibilidades de superação das condições de vida e de transformar a realidade. A conscientização nos convida a assumir uma posição utópica frente ao mundo. Freire entende a utopia como a dialetização dos atos de denunciar e anunciar. O ato de denunciar a estrutura desumanizante e de anunciar a estrutura humanizante. Quanto mais conscientes nos tornamos, mais capacitados estamos para sermos anunciadores e denunciadores. Os exemplos de denunciadores que temos na realidade latino-americana são muitos. Lideranças que enfrentam as desigualdades por meios pacíficos e pelo diálogo. Cristãs e cristãos que denunciam situações de injustiça e anunciam caminhos de solução. São como a luz que denuncia, o sal que preserva e que anuncia. A tensão anúncio, denúncia, ilustra bem o papel desempenhado por parte de igrejas na América Latina. Essa ação envolve a busca de um inédito viável, onde a realidade não é, mas está sendo e, portanto, pode ser transformada. Ao assumirmos uma postura de consciência crítica, também se assume a luta pela construção deste inédito viável, em uma postura de paciência histórica, que, para tanto, não basta querer, é preciso saber querer e saber fazer. No Peru, no país do Peru, o protagonismo de lideranças evangélicas foi central para um processo de concertação nacional. Conflitos foram superados em prol do fortalecimento da democracia em um processo de conscientização e de construção de um inédito viável. Ações de violência e conflitos armados ocorriam e a organização Paz e Esperança teve condições de envolver diferentes segmentos da sociedade, construir pontes e estabelecer uma ação efetiva e abrangente na promoção e na defesa dos direitos humanos. No caso brasileiro, a ação de grupos religiosos representa um locus capaz de promover a ponte entre a sociedade civil e o Estado, envolvendo segmentos para promover a paz e ações que contribuam para o fortalecimento da democracia, superação das desigualdades e do racismo. Há exemplos disso, poucos ainda, mas consistentes. É fundamental que prevaleça entre as religiões uma postura que defenda o pluralismo, a democratização do Estado, a valorização da participação cidadã e a resolução pacífica dos conflitos internos e internacionais. Como demonstra a experiência do Paz e Esperança, é possível que essa atuação se dê por meio da construção e da manutenção de amplas redes que assumam uma agenda que se paute pelo avanço das questões sociais, pela diminuição das violências, do discurso de ódio e das desigualdades, pelo enfrentamento do racismo, da xenofobia e da misoginia, e pela promoção de um desenvolvimento que seja sustentável e que valorize o respeito, a diversidade e a inclusão social. O povo brasileiro acaba de exercer seu direito democrático em uma eleição presidencial. Estou convencido de que o Brasil honrará a sua tradição e será agora um protagonista novamente na agenda futura e nos diálogos internacionais sobre variados temas, incluindo o da religião como uma das fontes das soluções globais que tanto buscamos. Prazer, muito obrigado. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor. To close out our day here, we're so fortunate to have Dr. Jacqueline Rivers. Dr. Rivers is the Executive Director of the Seymour Institute for Black Church and Policy Studies. and she has been a lecturer at Harvard University, Princeton University, the University of Notre Dame, the University of Pennsylvania, the American Enterprise Institute, the Vatican, the United Nations, and many other venues around the world. She served as a Hutchins Fellow at Harvard University. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jacqueline Rivers.
Thank you very much. I promise it's going to be short. It's been a long day, and I know everybody is eager to get to dinner. And so I promise not only to cut out a lot of what I said, I planned to say, but listening to the previous speakers, I've been moved. And so I really want to change the text of what I wanted to say. So first of all, Salamat Sore. Good afternoon, everybody. It is a privilege to be speaking here today, and it is truly inspiring what is being done at the R20 and the work of Nahdlatul Ulama is especially inspiring to me to see this effort to really make a world in which we can live together peacefully. I also want to mention that this conference is really in the tradition of the Bandung Conference, when the nation of Indonesia is again playing a leading role on the global stage, advocating once more for peaceful coexistence among the nations and for the eradication of racial and religious prejudice and violence. And I'm humbled to think that I might in some small way be playing the role of the very famous Black American novelist Richard Wright, who was at that Bandung conference and reported on it, insisting to bring it to the attention of the Western world and to point out the assertion of sovereignty among these newly independent nations. So I'm here as a Black woman, I'm here as a Jamaican, as the executive director of the Seymour Institute for Black Church and Policy Studies, and I come really speaking from a Christian perspective. Speaking really believing in religious liberty, believing that only as we have the freedom to embrace our deeply held beliefs, to follow our conscience, that we can have genuine faith. But I hope to appeal to the common thoughts and shared values that we're here to affirm today, even though I come from my own perspective. The panel that I'm on today is one of grievance and truth-telling, and it is a very heavy charge. Listening to the Archbishop from Nigeria talk about the kind of ravages that are occurring there, listening to what is happening to Christians in the Middle East, the conflict in India, it is a very heavy charge. Truly, we are in a world that suffers from ubiquitous evil. But the first step in addressing that evil has got to be confession. And so I want to acknowledge, just briefly, just a few of the things that Christianity, or that have been done in the name of Christianity. The kind of global conquest that was justified by Christianity, enslaving Africans in the millions, colonizing an entire continent. I want to acknowledge the complicity of the church in Germany and the Roman Catholic Church in the Nazi regime. I want to acknowledge the conflict between Christians in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, Protestant against Catholic, in the troubles that took so many lives in such savage ways. Confession is the first thing that we need in our midst. We have to confront what we are doing. And I admire the work of the R20 in calling for that kind of confronting in each religious tradition what we are doing wrong. But confession is not enough. We have got to turn to repentance. Abraham Lincoln, the famous President of the United States, in his second inaugural address, said that if every drop of blood that had been drawn with the lash from the back of the slaves were in the Civil War to be repaid by a drop of blood drawn with the sword, then truly God was just and righteous altogether. He repented wholeheartedly of the evil of slavery in the United States. And he was determined to stay the course and to abolish slavery. We need that kind of thoroughgoing repentance. And that is the role of the R20. To facilitate the kind of conversations that Archbishop Warda said could not happen in the Middle East any longer. The kind of honest conversation between different religions so that people can truly begin to turn around and to live in a very different way. To facilitate that kind of dialogue is truly the charge of the R20. My time is up, so I want to turn to the last factor, which is forgiveness. Because once there has been the confession and the turning around, the repentance, there has to be the healing and the forgiveness. It's central to the Christian tradition. It's central to our belief that God forgives us through the death of our Lord Jesus Christ. And it is a key to moving forward, that there has to be forgiveness. That kind of forgiveness was practiced recently in the United States by Mother Emanuel, a black church where a white terrorist came, fellowshipped with people, where he was in Bible study with them, and after spending an hour with them, he turned around and viciously murdered 9 people. And the survivors, the families of those who had been murdered, forgave him. They forgave him publicly. Some of them forgave him within 48 hours of the event. Some of them took longer. Some forgave even during a baseball game. Forgiveness is possible. And it's not only the Christian tradition that teaches it. Among Muslims, there's rahmah, mercy, that we have to want the best, even for bad people. Because according to Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, the Quran teaches, we have not sent you except as a mercy to the worlds. That kind of loving kindness, that forgiveness, is what is essential. Whatever our tradition of faith, we are created by the same God. We share a common humanity. We all suffer pain when we're wronged. We all stumble. We all do wrong ourselves. We all have access to God's forgiveness. And so we must confront what we've done wrong. We must turn away from that wrongdoing. And then we must forgive. We have a God of grace, of power, of justice, a God of healing. And He is our hope. He is our hope that the R20 will play this role to bring about much healing among various religions across the world.
Thank you all for staying again. You're the people with the solidarity and with the perseverance. We will need you in the years ahead. Thank you again. Enjoy your evening.
Speakers and also moderator, please remain on your stage as we would like to have a token of appreciation. I would like to invite Mr. Sohaidi, Mr. Rumadi to give the token of appreciation to our beloved speakers and also moderator for the third session. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause to our speakers. All right, now Mr. Rumadi is giving the token of appreciation to the speakers, and followed also the certificate to all the speakers for these sessions. For the next one, the certificate. All right, once again, ladies and gentlemen, give a big round of applause to our speakers, and also thank you very much to our moderator. And after that, we will have the photo group sessions. Photographer, please capture this beautiful moment. Okay, thank you very much, all the speakers, ladies and gentlemen. Now you may return to your seats. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of the event this afternoon. Once again, let's give a big round of applause to the G20 Religion Forum for the first day session. Today we had thoughtful discussion and rich insights for all of our honorable speakers. And I have also information that tonight we will have a dinner program at 7 p.m. And for delegates and speakers will be held at Sofitel, and for PBNU and TVNU will be held at Grand Hyatt Bali. Please gather at the lobby area for shuttle bus at 7:30 p.m. and 6:30. On behalf of the committee, we would like to thank all of our guests and speakers for your attendance and participation today. It has been a fruitful deliberation. In the meantime, let's continue to recover together, recover stronger. Thank you for coming, and see you tomorrow. Shalom, Om Santi, Santi Om. Wallahu muwaffiq ila aqwamit thoriq. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.